inventory time, a lot of maintenance stuff. Then you've got to also kind of a parts catalog of what you really are spending on that asset. So what technology is going to do is make it easier for you to collect the data that you need to have to make a decision. It's not going to require it up front to do it beforehand, but the trend is certainly that way. BIM is making a major hit on most database management programs, and so it will help force or at least drive some of the change that we're seeing in the future.
Is that where you were headed with your question?
Yeah, sort of.
Are you also thinking?
When you look at a facility project from a P&L standpoint, and the facilities folks come up with the total cost of ownership, but then you also need to figure out the technology infrastructure, and it has its own capital renewal and deferred maintenance portion. So we as a financial person needs to look at all elements, including technology. Otherwise, we are underestimating the TCO.
Yes, and APPA did a thought leader symposium where we looked at evolving technology and how it's impacting the entire environment of facilities in the institution. And we recognize that if without a partnership between facilities and IT, you could be going these totally different directions. That's why we're here today to talk about this to the chief financial officer, because many times those folks report up, or at least they're on a peer line with the chief information officer. Without that partnership, we're dead in the water. And we need that, because then we are competing in the wrong way. The IT folks will not like the following statement I'm going to make, but the bottom line is technology is just another utility. If we can start thinking of it like that, and no other way, and put that on the same TCO, we would be golden. And the institution ought to be pushing that. So I don't know if that's where you were also headed, Don.
Smart utility.
If you're doing this right, and it's an institutional effort, your chief information officer will be involved as well, and that project delivery have the technology it takes for a lab, or the technology it takes for a classroom or administrative building built into the delivery cost. You should have the technology that, or the M&O to run that technology built into the middle part. And if your switches and your routers and servers, et cetera, need replaced every so often, you should have that built into the recapitalization cost. So you are looking at the total picture.
Let me just give you two numbers. When we first, just to finish up this, when we first did the study, we totaled everything up on a cost per year basis and looked at the cash flow of all the buildings on campus and the cash flow of IT. Which one was higher? IT was by about $1 million because they have the short life cycles. So they were really outspending facilities on their needs because of their short life cycles. Randy?
That was a great question. I can remember when the facilities budget was actually larger than the IT budget, but that's been a while. We had another question.
Carla, I think.
I was going to ask if once you sold the total cost concept to the management, and then how do you fund the repair and replacement, I guess? Is it an annual budget allocation that you put it in a pool that you spend over time, or is it every time you have that you go back?
Good question.
I'm not sure I understand the whole question. Is it
It's around the cash flows, I think.
cash flows? Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that will happen, if you're an auxiliary, it's great because you can earn the money and save it. I mean, that's their role. But if you're much of the academic side, you got to figure out how that cash flow is going to happen. I think Don made a good point. Once you get the data in front of a good understanding, whoever president or trustee group, I know when we got it in front of our trustee, they said this is the kind of detail we need, because we are in the investment business, not in the maintenance business. I got to look at how this thing's going to help us. If I buy a new building, I got to know what the impact of that is. And so now they require us anyway that we can't get a project approved without total cost of ownership numbers sitting on the form. And so if you can get the buy-in, that isn't guaranteeing funding, but that's guaranteeing at least an approach.
That goes back to what Lander said earlier. This is an institution initiative, not facilities, or not the business office. It will fall apart if you don't have all the stakeholders buying into this.
Yeah, and it helps everybody deal with those spikes. I think that's where you were also headed. Yeah, and if you can get your, which they showed you in theirs, Brigham Young did it, UT Austin's in the room, they're doing, if you can show your cash flows of what you're going to need at any given time, that you don't need it here, you do need it there, then you can even that out over time. That's why it's got to be long-term. That's why everybody's got to be on the same page.
That's what I was like, do you convince them to fund that on every year, a portion of it that you can spend in year 5 or?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
It's out of reserve or pool.
Right.
That's exactly right.
A reserve, and then obviously, you know, if you don't spend all this year's money, don't let them take it. You got to roll that into next year, because you will spend it.
So for those 4 buildings, Ryan, that you mentioned that are in the program now, have you established like a sinking fund of some sort or other, where you're putting money into that for those 4 buildings, so as you can cover the spikes and valleys and such as they come?
We haven't quite gotten there yet, but
That is the goal.
Yeah.
We're just embarking on the journey. We actually shared with our board, here's where we're at with the level of funding, here's where we need to be. So each year when we do resource allocations, what we're trying to do is build towards what we know we're gonna need to be. And as was just said, we won't be spending it every year, but we'll be setting it aside for when we do need to spend it.
And this is not a building program per se. This is all of the assets on campus. So you gotta have your asphalt and your parking lots and sprinkler systems and all of the other stuff that makes up the distribution lines, because those become big numbers as well, and that's your surprise factors.
Yes.
How would the cost of ownership apply to donated assets?
To donated assets?
What did you say?
Donated
How
assets.
would TCO apply to donated assets?
Those
I
are
can
always
tell you,
fun.
I can tell you my story, and you won't quite understand it, but the board came back after we got into this and said, we're no longer gonna fund donated buildings after they build them. So they made a policy statement that the donor has to know the total cost of ownership, not the total cost to build. And we thought, okay, no more buildings on campus, we're done, cooked, you know, all of that. But it's surprising, we've done 9 where they've fully funded the project that we've built. So we have that money for the whole life of those 9 buildings that we can allocate. And we find that as we allocate it, we're actually saving more money because we have the money and we can do what we want when we want. And so it's a good model for donors to take advantage of. Some balk at it, we've turned some buildings down because they don't want a total cost, so.
There's a book APPA produced just a few years back, and it's getting a lot of play right now. It has a wonderful Amazon title called Buildings, the Gifts That Keep on Taking, for the very reason we just described. So you come see me and I'll get you a copy of that book. How's that for asking a question? All right.
Back here.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that total cost of ownership, and a lot of times private universities are ahead of public universities in terms of full costing their cost of doing business to different programs, including their physical assets, and they tend to look at it as their whole budget with all the resources and how they allocate it to serve their mission. Whereas their public, it tends to be a lot of different buckets that come in from different sources, whether that be the state or tuition or one-time capital or other things like that. What would you suggest if a public institution wants to get involved in this a lot more? I think they got a little ways, probably a little farther to go a lot of times.
Well, I know part of the APPA survey, I'm on that committee with Doug. We have several state institutions, including University of Texas, Anna's here from Texas, but probably half the schools are state.
Yeah, most of the schools that participated in the APPA ASHRAE research study were the big publics. So come see us afterwards if you want. We can connect you to Anna at UT Austin, but we can also talk about getting that survey tool to you, and maybe you can use that to help drive your data gathering effort, and to get you to see, maybe to talk to some of the institutions that were part of that survey. It could give you some ideas about where they're headed, what they're doing with it, et cetera. But the publics are going to, as I said in the introduction to all of this, are a key driver in making and helping the cost of higher education. We have to do something, and I think the publics are critical to this. So we'd love to talk to you after this.
But I appreciate your comment. Having worked in higher ed and working with both public and private, I think the challenge in a public institution is going to be that you're going to probably have 3 or 4 different internal sales, as opposed to a private where you may have one neck to grab. That's the challenge, but at least you'll have good data and you'll have a good story.
I disagree with that comment.
Go ahead.
Everybody thinks privates don't have the same problems and issues that publics have, but we combined 7 funding sources to get to what, because you had all the assets in one place, and so you didn't have a furnishings account, you didn't have all the other accounts all over, you just plopped it into one. And that was an advantage to us, it was an advantage to the institution, but we still had them. And so it's a matter of when you see the picture, and I would say that, boy, if you go after funding, make sure you've got some priorities and some data to back you. And then the argument's yours to give to them instead of theirs to throw back at you, because that's really how it works. If you don't have anything they can argue against.
It's really the institutional decision makers being armed with the kind of data that help them make informed decisions. That's ultimately what it is. And if you can do that, then you can get them to think about what programs are the highest priority and where they need to go in publics. I don't care whether you're public, private, or whatever. I came out of public, and I know that they're capable of doing that. I watched them do it when they would think that way and have the data in front of them.
We went up to the state of Utah and presented this total concept, and they are still mulling it over. But one guy made an interesting comment. He says, I'm sick and tired of getting all this piecemeal from higher ed. I got a list of projects here. I've got all this over here. I got to determine the maintenance level. I got to do that. Why don't we just give you $9 a square foot and just say you manage it? Whether you're going to manage it as a new building or a replacement, or you're going to put in savings, or let the professionals manage it. I don't think we're ready to do that on our institutions, but I think they're getting a little fed up with us, and something like that could happen.
Well, from a best practice standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, we have a very diverse customer base, but we're working with customers as diverse as Upper Iowa, Toyota, Cargill, Zurich Insurance. I mean, this is where your corporate 500 are moving. So, I mean, I think, you know, not that they always have the right answer, but I think that's sending a message, I think, that if those institutions, those organizations are moving in this direction, then we probably should too. We've probably got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Or you can go early.
Or go to listen to Bob.
All right. Thank you very much.
Let me go grab this guy's card.
Thanks.